Hey everyone, my name is Brandon from Live Production Mastery, and today I want to talk to you about tech, and specifically how I would build out a studio, the tech I would use, the gear, the monitors, the cameras, everything you would need to build out a studio, a church, anything that's having to do with live streaming or recording. Here is exactly how I would build my ultimate infrastructure. So, first thing we're going to look at is the gear. So this is, the most exciting part for me. This is tech world, right? So over here I have a studio, and this is just a 3D render of the space actually I'm currently in. I'm over here in this conference room office, but this is the space, and you've seen this space before. Over here used to be the old tech world. This was the ultimate unlimited budget studio. We have this, warped video wall over here. And we've recently moved Tech World over here. Now, it doesn't look exactly like this. This was the render. This was the idea that I had spec'd for this gig. However, it's very similar. We do have this rack. There is a lot of this gear in the rack. And then we do have, an 8-foot table with, multiple iMacs. This in the render is not iMacs. I'll get into what these would have been. And then we actually have an audio board over here, which is a lot larger than the one that I had spec'd in physical size, not capabilities. So the studio that I'm currently in is similar to this render, but it's not exact. This was the perfect world kind of setup, but budgets, limitations, timing, gear availability, things like that limit what actually happens. But I wanted to go over what I spec'd and kind of like in my head what the ultimate setup would be for one person to run everything. Now, multiple people can always run everything. You can have directors, technical directors, producers, you can have an audio guy, you can have a graphics, a playback guy, so there's so many stations that you can do, but I like being able to make sure one person could control everything if they had to. Obviously, we know that it's not a perfect world and we don't always get a crew of our dreams on every single show. Sometimes you have to run things with 1 or 2 or 3 people, and those people aren't always the most knowledgeable about what they're doing or the gear that they're on, so a lot of times you have to step in. So let's get into the gear itself. So let me explain this Tech World setup a little bit. So over here, I have a layout of what I would have been sitting at, controlling live streams and shows and things like that. First we need to get into like what we're doing. We have video walls, we have confidence monitors, we have a live feed, right, that we are switching. We're recording all of this, obviously. And so we have an in-person audience and we have a virtual audience. So this would be considered a hybrid event. So the setup needs to be very versatile. And by the way, we also have multiple setups in here, right? We could be pointing at the video wall, we could be pointing at the podcast station. So the system just needs to be as flexible as possible. That's the idea. It's just what I spec'd. Let's start with the Atem over here, the 8K Constellation in this rack. So this is my go-to, the 8K version, which has 40 inputs. Let's see if I can get, 40 inputs and 24 outputs. So this is going to handle a lot of cameras. It obviously can do 4K, it can even go up to 8K, but then you end up pairing 4 of these together. So really, we're not even going to talk about 8K. 4K is great. Honestly, we stream in HD still, so we're not too worried about getting up into 4K, but we want to make sure we're future-proof, so this is why I went with a switcher like this. 40 inputs should be plenty. I really, I see myself getting up to 40 inputs all the time, but I don't really see myself going past it. And if you are, we just rework our workflows a little bit, make it a little bit more efficient, say, hey, let's just do playback and graphics from this thing instead of spreading everything out too much. Too many inputs can be too much. So that is that. And then 24 outputs is enough. So with so many devices and sources and flexibility, I find myself that 24 outputs, I can get by with it. I would obviously love more because then I'm just more flexible. But I deal with 24, and what I usually do is I route these 4 multi-views here, I route it right back in to the switcher, right? So I take multi-view 1, 2, 3, and 4, I do little patch cables, and I go right into 37, 38, 39, and 40. And I standardize on this, by the way. And the reason I do this is because every single output comes usually from this 24 SDI outputs here. This way in the switcher, I can just route a multi-view where I need a multi-view, or a preview or a program or a confidence monitor feed. Whatever I need, I can route from the switcher, instead of like saying, oh, this is only a multi-view and it will only ever be a multi-view, and you can't change that. That's very limiting if I'm going on stage and teaching a show, or I'm working with let's say a church, or I'm working with a talent on stage, and they want to, they're maybe a little more technical. They want to make sure that their audio is coming through. So they want like audio meters up on screen. They want to see their laptop and a couple other cameras so they know where to look. So a lot of these things are really helpful coming from a multi-view versus just one screen, or having multiple confidence monitors. I could put a big 75-inch TV in front of them and then split up a multi-view into 4 quads, and now I can give them 4 different looks on one screen through one cable, and I don't have to run 4 different cables. So there's a lot of good reasons why to basically do a patch, call it a loop back, whatever you want, and then route everything out of these. I understand why Blackmagic did this, processing power, right? They want to give you the most capabilities. But I really like, maybe in some of their other switchers, the Atem Mini Extreme models and things like that, you can just pick which output is a multi-view. So that's really helpful. So, yeah, so that's the switcher. So many reasons why I go with this switcher. I'm not going to get into all of them in this video. It would take forever, but it's just super versatile, right? So just know that. Also, it has the super sources, right? It's got 2 of them. You can link them together. You can do an 8 box. You can technically do a 12 box if you use all the DVEs. So there's so many reasons to go with this. And the biggest one is because it is a hardware-based solution. It is not software-based. So many people say, oh, you can do all this in Ecamm. You can use NDI. You can do vMix. You can do all these different things with all this technology nowadays. And yes, but you get into delays and boggling down machines that weren't necessarily meant for these things. This machine is purpose built for this. It can honestly run forever. Has it ran into a bug before? So rare, like so rare. In the multiple years that I've been pounding away at this machine, I've only ever really occurred user error, not the machine's error. So take that for what you will. When you do IMAG, and IMAG is when you are basically having a camera shoot at someone and then put that image on screen really large next to them, right? So people can see the person and the blown up version on the big screen, on like a video wall at a concert, etc. That's IMAG. And if you have a delay, which if I'm running this through a computer that is like vMix or Ecamm or OBS or whatever you want to use, a lot of times you're going to get a delayed output. And even in live production today, we still get a delayed output. You're not going to get 0 millisecond delay, but you want that as close to 0 as possible. And what you don't want is, the hand to wave of the person, and then on screen 2 seconds later the hand waves. Like, that's very distracting. So this is why I use the Atem. I went with the Atem and Blackmagic a very long time ago, just so I wouldn't have those delay issues and then couldn't get around them in the future. So that's my spiel on the Atem. So that is basically the brain of the whole system, right? It's routing everything. If that thing goes down, has dual power supplies, then basically the whole system goes down. So it's a $10,000, $9,000 switcher. I'm putting a lot of faith and money and effort into that switcher so that it's running everything. And that also simplifies when you have one system kind of pushing everything everywhere. It makes programming a lot easier and routing and whatnot. So notice there is no 40x40 video hub. We do have one here, but I'm deciding not to use it just because I don't need it. The one thing I am currently using the video hub for is because I don't have the cameras that I spec'd in this guy. I have the Blackmagic Studio cameras, which are great, by the way. You can do camera control and everything from the software, but they're not PTZs. So I'll get into that. But because of that, they need an SDI signal going back to them. And I didn't want to technically waste SDI signals from the back of the Constellation here, because there's only 24 of them. I didn't want to waste, if I have 4 cameras, 4 of these are just loop backs to the camera just so I can get camera control. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the program feed, running that out into a video hub, which basically is just a glorified splitter. So I'm basically just splitting that 40 by 40, or I'm splitting that program feed and sending it to all the cameras using the video hub. And that way I get the camera control going back to all of them as well. Okay, so let's look through here. These monitors, okay? A lot of people looked at these guys here. What these are the LG 42.5 inch screen monitors, okay? So the reason I went with these guys is because they can do a quad multi-view standard in the monitor. Okay, this works for a lot of reasons. This makes this very capable. So basically what I would do is I would run 4 signals, 4 separate signals. This is where you start getting into wanting more outputs to each of these monitors. The monitor itself is going to split this up into a quad view. So I can then route a multi-view to the upper left quadrant of this first monitor, another multi-view here, MV1, MV2. Then I can do a different feed. This is probably going to be one of these Mac Minis sitting down here, okay? And so I can go over to the 3D render here, and I can kind of zoom in to what is in this rack. So, we have the Constellation, we have some HyperDecks over here, okay? So these are for records. I find I don't do ISO records. I'm not using the ISO records. It's great to have it, but really what I'm doing is I'm recording a program feed, maybe a backup of that program feed, which is, again, you don't get these in the Atem Extreme ISOs, you don't get your backups, so I highly suggest getting backups and doing dual program records. And then I can also pick like an ISO feed if I'm trying to do that. Again, I can easily add for $1,000 like an Atem Mini Extreme SDI version, and I could do some loop throughs, I could add in the 40 by 40 and get a bunch of outputs, and I can get ISO records. So literally for like a couple grand, you're gonna get all your ISO records. You can get them to an SSD. You could go with bigger HyperDecks, but I'm going with the HyperDeck Minis here. They're easy, etc. So actually, I think these are web presenters down here. I think I would have done the HyperDecks or the reason you would go with HyperDecks over the Atem Extreme SDI ISO versions, things like that. They only do HD, and if you do want to record in 4K, you're going to need a 4K recorder. You could record in camera if your cameras are capable of that, etc. So honestly, behind here, I might hide more HyperDecks, whatever, but on the front of this, just to be clear, these are web presenters, not HyperDecks. And I do have multiple web presenters because a lot of times we are multicasting. It's helpful to do backup streams, etc. These web presenters, they're a little more iffy. I have had problems with Atem encoders in the past. Just little troubleshooting things. Could be user error, could be IP address things, whatever. So having backups are good, and you'll hear that a lot. A lot of this system involves a lot of backups. The only thing that isn't really fully backed up is this Constellation because it has dual power supplies itself. You can easily just get 2 Constellations, I guess, if you really wanted to. Use a 40 by 40 to split things out again. All right, so these are a bunch of Mac Minis. When I spec'd this out, the guy I was building this for was like, why don't we just do Mac Studios? I was like, yeah, that would be cool. You absolutely could. That's a lot more money. It would definitely be a lot more future-proof. But for what I'm using these Mac Minis for, it's perfectly fine. Still plenty of power to run this. We're not running, processing farm on these things. They're dedicated to run a Zoom call. They're dedicated to run ProPresenter. They're dedicated to run a PowerPoint or the Atem software itself. So they're not really doing any heavy lifting. They're just different machines split up. So that way, if something were to happen, if one were to go down, one lose internet access, one gets a bug or crashes or needs to shut down or restart for whatever reason, I have backups. And each one of these Mac Minis can back each other up. They can all run the Atem software, multiple Zoom machines, multiple playback machines. I can throw graphics on a playback or playback on a graphics machine and vice versa. So that is the reason for this, but it does split everything up nicely. Okay, and you'll see that when I get over here to these monitors, they would really end up looking like these guys over here, where I basically have a section of a monitor dedicated to each and every Mac Mini. And then you have the keyboards and mouses for those Mac Minis down here. These are pull-out drawers, etc. So like that's what we're getting into. So we're getting into multi-views, preview program right here, middle of the top, and then more multi-views. Again, you can put whatever you want on these multi-views. So that's not like, oh, I would exactly line it up like this. It's gonna change, and that's the point. And by routing individual SDI lines, 4 of them to each of these monitors, then I can change where these are. Oh, you know what? I want to stack these Zoom drones. Oh, you know what? I want to move Control Mac Mini over here on this display. Oh, I want to set it up like this. You know what? I just want to blow up this multi-view here. I want to put program really big over here, and then I want to keep this middle one the same. I can do that because on the monitors themselves, I can just select any one of the 4 inputs going into them. So, that's, again, really versatile. Per show, you can change how you want the setup, right? Someone else comes in, you're working with other people, you want to lay things out, you don't want to make it too confusing. Hey, we only need this and this for this show. We have all these capabilities, but we only need a few things. You can kind of dumb down your system almost on the fly, pre-show, just dumb it down for yourself and then make your life easy. It's very complicated in what it's capable of, right? It's very capable, but you can always go and do less if you need to. So that's the point. All right, now with all of these guys, you do need a bunch of converters. I just threw the number 50 out here. This was just because I was showing to a client and I was like, hey, we're probably gonna need at least 50 of these converter things. They're always good to have. Honestly, I mean, if I start doing a bunch of math here, yeah, we're getting close up there. I mean, none of this stuff is SDI. So a lot of what I'm doing is converting a lot of HDMI products to SDI. I could go with PCs instead of Macs, try to get cards for these PCs that have SDI outputs, etc. One, I would say I'm biased to Mac, but there's a lot of perks. AirDrop being one of them, sharing files between them. Oh, well, you can just do a NAS and then drag and drop. And yes, there's universal control now. There's so many reasons to go with an Apple ecosystem to make your life easy. I mean, clients text me things. We're about to go on stage. They want to hey, pull this picture up. Hey, I had this idea. Hey, click on this link, and can do this video all the time. Hey, we just got this. Here's to the producer. The producer's like, how fast away can I get it to you? I'm like, text it to me. Just text it to me. It's on your Mac. You have a Mac. I have a Mac. Just text it to me, and I'll pull it up, and it'll be fast. A lot of people do this with PCs. Oh, I got to email it. Oh, we got to wait, a minute for the email to load and all this stuff. And so sometimes, doing an AirDrop of a file, texting a file, so many ways. Yes, you can do GroupMe. You can do all these, Android text and all this stuff. So that's completely up to you how you want to do it. But I suggest to all my clients and where I work, we use Macs. Now, I'm on a PC right now, and that's because the 3D render software that I'm using, this guy over here, only runs on a PC. Okay, so we're getting through Tech World here. Things that I don't need to spend a lot of time on for obvious reasons. We have an advanced panel. We have currently the 1ME advanced panel. I think, especially for this setup, I kind of like the 2ME. It's a lot bigger, but it is faster. However, I'm perfectly happy going with the 1ME because honestly, the shows that I do, we're not doing 40 inputs of switching. We really have like 10, maybe 20 total, right? And usually I can get away with like 12. So whatever the 1ME can't do for me in terms of as many buttons as I would like, etc., even with the shift page on them, I can do with these Stream Decks. Notice I have a lot of Stream Decks, okay? So the Stream Decks, I like to split up what they're used for, right? We can use the macro pack, especially the new one that we just came out with. So we can do that for a super source. That'll be great for certain things, not all things, but very certain things. I can have, the video wall controlling what's on there. I can have, input sources, etc. So many reasons. I could do certain audio controls from the Stream Decks. I can control as much as I want. A lot of times I actually control what goes on these outputs here of my 3 kind of large quad multi-view monitors. I'll control what goes to here. Okay, so that is another reason to use the Stream Decks, just changing aux outputs. Simple as that. The way I use this is I usually run ME1, so basically the switcher has something called MEs. Basically, each one has a preview and a program, so you can do transitions and things like that. You can just make it a little bit cleaner than just hard cutting, an aux out. So I use ME1 for my live stream, as pretty much everyone does. I use ME2 for the video wall, and then I use ME3 and 4 as like sub switchers into ME1. So let's say I want to do some sort of look with the lower thirds already embedded, instead of like pulling up a source, adding in a keyer, making sure it's getting preview, and then taking it and like having to click all the different keyer options and remember and do all that. A lot of time I just build a look in ME3 or 4, usually ME3, and then I can just pick up ME3 from my main live stream mix, which is in ME1. So I just pick up ME3 and I send it, because it already is exactly what I need. I know it's the right look. Every time it's like a safety shot, like I know I can go to it and it's gonna be correct. ME4, here's a trick. Here's a fun trick that I do. So a lot of times people do screen shares, and they'll have a lot of information on screen, right? They'll have a lot of info. So what I'll do is I'll take their screen share, which is just an HDMI feed converted to SDI into the switcher, and I'll put it into ME4 and I'll put it into DVE. And then I'll use the jog wheel on the, not the jog wheel, I'll use the joystick. I'll use the joystick on the advanced panel, and I will zoom in to an image. Now, if you're doing an HD stream and you have everything coming in 4K, you're not losing any resolution on your output, right? However, you do lose resolution when you do this, so I choose when to do this, and I don't get too detailed, I don't zoom in too far, but a lot of times people have weird images, I can't really read that on the live stream, I'm doing a picture-in-picture, so what I do is ME4 always kind of has a DVE blown up of the person's laptop feed or whatever content, the PowerPoint we're talking about. And I can just add a little bit of movement. It's all manual, okay? But this is like a good hack, which is to be able to take their feed, zoom into it, and then I could like pan, or I could move up and down, or I could, zoom in on something because it's a lot of text and it's hard to read. A lot of times these are websites or things like that. People are looking for specific information to pull out. So that is a quick hack of how I use ME4. And again, great things about the Constellation switcher. Okay, so these are like little tidbits that I can do in a show, and people really like it. They're like, oh, I didn't even know you did that, until they watch it back later. And they're like, I love that. I'm like, cool, awesome. All right, so we got the Stream Decks. All right, last piece on the table here is this audio board. So this audio board is actually just a controller, okay? It is essentially a MIDI controller over USB, might be network, I'll have to look into that. And it's controlling this Behringer mixer over here. All right, let's see if I can pull the Behringer mixer up, this guy. Okay, so why did I choose this one? One, it's a rack-mounted switcher, so I can keep everything in this rack nice and tidy, less cables coming over here. There's already plenty of them. So a couple reasons. One, you can run a stage box with this guy. All right, so basically I can have enough inputs over here for everything in the rack, and then whatever's up on stage. Let's say I have maybe my mics and stuff up on stage. Maybe I have laptop feeds coming up there. I might have a whole bunch of other things. Then this guy can basically, this is not the highest quality sound system. I get that, in a perfect world, I go with, a larger Allen and Heath mixer. That's my go-to Allen and Heath. It's a great bang for the buck. If you want to go Yamaha, Midas, and really get up there, absolutely, you can do that. But I went for a more cost-effective route for this guy. I mean, we're talking $1,700, which is like very little in the audio world. And it does enough. The reason I like this one is because it has a very popular controller that you can use with it called the X-Touch. This guy here, $540 controller. This is really low profile, okay? So it can sit really nice on the desk. I wanted motorized faders and I wanted physical faders, right? I didn't want to do everything digital. I could use an iPad, touchscreens, things like that. I wanted the motorized feel. I want to be able to kind of just look over. I could even almost feel over. I could tell how loud something was, how the volumes, etc. A lot of times what I'm doing for these live streams is, let's say you have 2 people up on stage, okay, and we can get into how we do audio with matrices and groups and things like that. You know, you can put all your vocals in a group, so you turn that one fader up and all your vocals go up, etc. So let's say I have 2 faders over here for vocals, people on stage talking, whatever, right? We're talking about corporate. We're not talking about church live streaming. It's a little different, right? You're going to want a bigger audio board. We're going to dedicate someone. Corporate, it's a little bit different. So once you ring out the room, and again, this is why you go with a board that has a GEQ or a PEQ, something you can ring out the room, get rid of all the feedback, all that. Okay. Then this is simple enough for someone else to come in once it's set up and use. So you can have 2 faders for, let's say, mics. You can have faders for playbacks. You have Zoom. Big reason you need an audio board. I mean, honestly, you can get away with a Rodecaster Pro at this point. Very limited, but still somewhat capable. You know, you need a feed going out to your speakers in the room. You need a feed going out for your live stream mix. You need a feed going for maybe monitors on stage, for maybe you have in-ear monitors for talent, maybe you have multiple sets of in-ears. You need to, you know, go do a mix back to Zoom if you're going to have virtual participants coming in. So the audio board, the Behringer here, can do all of that. It takes a little bit of setup, but it can do all of that. And then this guy over here, the X-Touch, has enough control physically on the board for me to run all of that. Now, I also obviously still have a control here, right? And a lot of these machines are doing double duty where, you know, playback can also have Atem software, or playback 2 can also have the audio GUI running on it, right? So I can go in here and change anything that I need to with the audio board. So like, again, lots of capabilities here. That's the point, all right? So the audio board, just know that it's very capable. I can run a stage box, which is one Ethernet line all the way to stage, because in this idea, right, I'm in the back of the room here. So somewhat of a front of house. The reason I placed it here exactly, if you look at this space, okay, we have this wall right here, so no one's going to be behind me. Great. So I'm backed up against the wall. We have the rack right here and this pillar. Well, this pillar is a great way to get a bunch of cables going up across the ceiling and then back down behind the video wall. All right, so this is infrastructure. Like, the pillar's already here. I've actually already ran all these cables. We already have this set up. Again, very close to what this render is. And the only reason it's not exact, it's not, you know, we just don't have all of the gear. We didn't go with the exact same cameras that we spec'd. Again, a lot of this has to do with budget reasons. We can easily upgrade and move to all these things in the future. But for right now, you know, we have what we have. So we have the cables all go here across the ceiling, so all the cables are off the floor. You know, the other thing that's not in this render right now is we added a whole podcast setup. So basically over here, there's a whole podcast setup. So we got more cameras, more confidence monitors. You know, the camera angles shoot like this. And again, this is a great reason for the 3D render. So basically, you know, we can have a person here, and the background of the shot is the video wall. Now, it's actually a little bit bigger than the video wall. I can try to set up the real shot right here. But basically, you not only see the video wall in the shot, and it looks like that, but you kind of see that you're in a space. So the video wall's in it, but it doesn't take up your whole camera shot. And that's the point. The podcast station is not supposed to be, the look of you on stage where you have this big video wall and you're doing a close-up, right? This is a very kind of professional look. It looks like you spent real money on it. The podcast setup is kind of supposed to give you like, hey, where are we? Oh, we're in a studio. Oh, the studio has a budget, right? Because they have a video wall and the camera quality is great and all these other things. So, we're not always trying to fake where we are. Sometimes we want people to know exactly where we are, which is in a studio. So that is a bunch of reasons, again, why we set up over here out of the way. This used to take up a lot more space. And you kind of need more people to run it. The audio board wasn't very accessible, etc. Because we don't currently have this audio board, I just stood up a 4-foot table right here in this gap. This gap's exactly 4 feet. So a 4-foot table with a PreSonus audio board on it. Again, it's just what we had, what we're working with. Would I love to upgrade? Yes, I love an Allen & Heath. Anything that can simplify workflows and do other stuff for me. But my current go-to is the SQ5, I believe. If you're gonna say, hey, do a band, run this, do this, SQ5, I'm very fast on. And it's very compact and still does 48 channels. That's the big thing about this board over here. Let's see, this, switch over. This audio board does 40 channels. Okay, so it does 40. There's certain I/O, so it's got 16 inputs right on the back, plus some auxes. However, it can go up when you add a stage box to a lot more. Okay, what else do we have here? What are some other links? Oh, okay, the DeckLink. So let's get into some of these playbacks here. So a common problem that I see a lot of people do is it's really just a choice, and they run into user error that makes their stream look more unprofessional, which is they'll take an HDMI coming right out of, let's say, a Mac or a PC. They'll do the HDMI out and they'll have videos playing on it, etc. No problem with that in particular. Problem is if you have any sort of computer shortcuts set up, like the ability to if you like 4-finger scroll, yeah, stuff like this, right? Where if you 4-finger scroll because you're used to it and then this happens, well, if you're doing playback full screen and you're not like taking over the whole screen, when you do this, this is what happens on your live stream, right? This is, in my view, very bad and very unprofessional. So one way to get around that is to have a dedicated output, not the HDMI out of a computer, but go through like a playback card or something. Those don't go by the same sort of gestures and commands that your normal HDMI will work through. So one way to do this is have a dedicated, output card for this. So there's a bunch of reasons why I'm going with the DeckLink. That's not the main reason, by the way. That's more of a perk, but it's a reason you should really think about it. You don't want people doing accidental things to your HDMI output. The way I'm getting multiple uses out of these playbacks. So playback, I'm running ProPresenter, okay? And we all know ProPresenter. I'll look it up here. ProPresenter, the most popular church software. Literally, that's what they go for. So many reasons to use ProPresenter. It's dead simple. It's fast. You can set up a lot of workflows. You can control it from Companion, right? People that don't want to pay for ProPresenter or use ProPresenter for a lot of these reasons, you can do key and fills out of it. I have a lot of previous videos on ProPresenter itself. Again, I'm not a big church streamer guy. I do live streams, corporate, concerts, all in between, a lot of video stuff. I don't do a lot of churches, but I use ProPresenter. And it's because, for me, it's like a Photoshop, but live, right? So I can move things, manipulate things, copy and paste things, alter, resize, etc. on the fly. You can totally use PowerPoint or Keynote instead of playback if you want to. You can totally use like free version, which is like VLC player for videos. Again, you just lose a lot of capabilities. You could use OBS for playback. So many things for playing back videos. But I like to use ProPresenter. That's me. And one of the reasons I like doing it so much is I can do really 4 different outputs out of one ProPresenter. So this one machine, that's not even the whole computer, that's just ProPresenter. I can do 4 separate outputs with a DeckLink card. So the DeckLink card here, I'm using the DeckLink Duo 2. All right, it's got total of 5 I/O. One of them's reference, the other 4 I'm using as outputs. You can use this as inputs. ProPresenter, again, gives me a lot of options. It now has live streaming capabilities. I could bring live feeds into ProPresenter, manipulate them, and then push them back out. Again, we're working at a delay, a slight delay at that point, but that could be okay if we're doing something really artsy. I look at a lot of really large concerts out there, like Ed Sheeran does great. If you're looking for like top-notch performance right now, like Ed Sheeran does a great job. He's doing a 360 tour where he's doing all these art overlays over live camera feeds, so it's like a pencil is like drawing him live. It's very cool and artsy and creative. I'm a big fan of the team, obviously. So this is one way we can do that, right? Again, capabilities. I can route certain things. I might have to go into the back of the rack and move a couple cables if I wanted to copy that exactly. But I basically am having 3 separate DeckLinks over here. So the reason you see it in this black box is because this is the Sonnet, right? So you take a DeckLink card, you throw it in this Sonnet, which is Thunderbolt 3, and then you can plug that into a Mac Mini down here, okay? And yes, these would be the M1 or M2 Mac Minis, whatever time it is. As the get decent ones, you want to have a good amount of space on them because you're going to put a lot of videos and graphics and things like that on it. But processing-wise, they have plenty of power. So, mic check, good. Okay, so I have 3 of them here. 2 of them are for my 2 playbacks, playback 1, playback 2. Okay, I'll move this guy so it's a little easier to see. And then I have one for Zoom ISO. So Zoom ISO right here, people in previous videos have asked me, why are you going back to doing it all laptops? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? A lot of times it's like per show. If things are planned out, Zoom ISO is a great way to get 4 people, virtual presenters coming in through kind of one computer. So it's a great use of the resources, but it's not always the fastest. It's not always the most reliable. It's pretty reliable, but it's I don't really trust technology as much as I use it for everything that I do. I don't trust it for so many reasons. So that's why I have backups. So I'm using Zoom ISO on this machine, and then I have my main Zoom drone that I'm using to like run the Zoom call for audio-wise. Zoom versus Zoom ISO, the Zoom application has a lot more perks. One thing I could easily turn any of these Mac Minis into is use Zoom Rooms. It's another way to do it, okay? Because with Zoom Rooms, you can also have like 3 outputs. The problem is you need to control it with an iPad. And again, I have iPads. I can get iPads in this mix. I can do a lot of things, control audio. I will probably have an iPad just on me in general, but I'm using Zoom ISO here and just a normal computer running Zoom, and I could have, again, 2 outputs from that one computer. So I could have my main screen, and then I could have like the secondary screen from Zoom, which again work differently. If you know anything about Zoom, you know that when you do a screen share, automatically that screen share comes up in your second window, right? If you have dual screens activated. So every single time someone does a screen share, it's gonna go to that second window. You full screen that second window on your second display, and boom, every time someone does a screen share on Zoom, it's going there, and it's not gonna mess up anything else. Great reason for Zoom ISO. Those feeds don't get messed up either when someone does a screen share. So a lot of perks. This is why I'm running kind of dual Zoom computers. If Zoom ISO goes down, I have my main Zoom. If my main Zoom for some reason goes down, I have Zoom ISO. Backups. All right, that's all I'll get into Zoom there. Again, very capable. If you don't need the ability to bring in virtual talent, you don't really need these Zoom computers, okay? I'm not saying you have to use 6. I'm saying I went with 6 because I'm using these monitors, because I'm, have these needs and things like that. Graphic stream machine. I have a dedicated computer that kind of just monitors my live stream, but I can also use that computer to run PowerPoints or pull up a graphic or a website, this way. And I usually have this machine not always in dual screen mode. A lot of times it's just duplicated, or I'll just pull up this one screen onto the feed so we can kind of scroll through like a live ticker or things like that. A lot of times we're using the internet for live information in mid-show. We want to see numbers. Maybe on this machine, I just have a website and it has some sort of countdown or clicker, or it's monitoring how much money we're raising or something like that. I could use the Atem and just pull out a specific portion. I could use a DVE, crop it in, a super source, whatever you want, and some sort of overlay. And I could bring that into our live stream and just kind of put it in the bottom corner. So again, just some sort of machine. A lot of people have multiple machines that do this, that just are responsible for like one specific task. That's all it needs to do the whole time. Again, very versatile. So this is the setup here. I kind of went through all the machines, keyboard and mouse for everything, because each one is a dedicated computer. Yes, I could use universal control and use one keyboard and mouse across all of them. You've seen me do that in previous videos as well, where I have a single keyboard and mouse and I can run my mouse between all the screens. I'd probably also set that up, but again, things break down, so I like having a dedicated keyboard and mouse, multiple people working on stuff. You don't want just one. You don't want one point where everything can fail. I get that that's the Constellation at this point, but a $10,000 bet on it. I'm putting some real, money and thought into where I'm putting all my marbles. So the other thing I have going on here is just a wireless transmitter receiver set. I could have multiple in here. Always good to have if for some reason, this is a very versatile studio. Okay, so in the studio over here, we might decide for some reason that we want to put something in the middle and we want to put a camera here and shoot this way up at the video wall, and I don't want to have to run cables. Maybe it's just a laptop feed that I need. Maybe we're going to do this thing outside where we're showing off a car. We're going to bring the car inside, or for whatever reason I want to, there's this big garage door right here. We could go outside and do a whole shoot outside. And so I'm gonna want some wireless cameras to be able to do that, so I don't have to like run a bunch of new lines out here. Now, I have lines spread out all over this place. I got extra lines back here. I have lines even dropped to this pillar here. And then some wireless lines. We got Apple TV for a bunch of reasons, for screen shares from computers, getting iPads up on screen, even just doing, using their backgrounds, like a screensaver type look, image loops, etc. So many reasons to go and have an Apple TV. So there's a bunch that I haven't listed in here. Again, this was just speccing this out for the client, but I did want to do a video where I go through all of the tech that kind of runs everything, right? Because people are like, well, why do we need to spend all this money on this? I mean, ballpark, I don't even know, right? Like if we go through, these are Blackmagic Smart Views. Again, we had these. I don't have to put these in the rack. A lot of the gear for this client is gear that we had and gear that I wanted to add that we currently didn't have. So that is a reason why I have this. We need a big network switch. There's a lot of things that we're networking. Ethernet is a huge part of this infrastructure here, okay? So you're gonna need a network switch. The network switch that I have is PoE. Oh, the other thing is if you are using a bunch of these converters, which I would need, converting a lot of this HDMI to SDI and vice versa, these Anchor power bricks, they have 10 USB ports on them. Way easier. I mean, if we're doing 50 of these converters, that means I need 50 plugs just for the converters. That's ridiculous. I would never do that. So I get these Anchor plugs and I run 10 USB to micro or USB-Cs for these things, and then I can, basically I'm using 5 power outlets to run all of my converters instead of 50. Huge savers. So these, just little hacks, things like that, that people do. Okay, because I mean, even for one of these that's 4 8, 12. I need 12 converters just for my multi-views, right? I mean, we're adding up very quickly here. Okay, let me get into a little bit of the networking. So networking, it's not as complicated as people think. I'm not running like separate networks for this and that. I do usually try to separate, like a local network and a network that is actually connected to the internet, to the world. I try to keep as many things like the Atem Constellation and I try to keep as many things off the network that goes out our pipe to the world. I don't want to boggle down or start having IP address issues with the network and the the router, right? That go out to the real world. So what I do is I usually have two networks: a local network that is literally just the Atem and a bunch of controllers. A lot of these Mac Minis have USB-Cs on the back, so I can run a dongle, because I'm going to need to run dongles anyway. Run a dongle, and I could have two Ethernets going into each Mac Mini. One for my local network, and one for the network that goes out to the rest of the world, the internet. And that's how I usually run this, okay? So this one here, my local network, would also be my cameras. Now let's get into the cameras that I spec'd and the cameras that we got. So we already had a bunch of the Blackmagic cameras. If I go up here to products, let's see, and I go to the professional cameras, yeah. So we already had a lot of the Studio Cam 4K Pros, okay? So these cameras are absolutely great, amazing, so many reasons to go with them. They can actually be run fully off of Ethernet as well, that's a perk, but not necessarily through a network switch. I'll get into that. But we have these cameras, they're great, love the look, tally lights, everything on them, super helpful, okay? Not bashing these cameras at all, but they're not PTZs. And we can turn them into PTZs, and we've done that in the past, but that's like a workaround. The cameras that I spec'd, right, were these expensive Canon CRN 500s. Plenty of people have done videos on these guys. They look great. They're super useful. They have all the I/O that you would need, right? So that is what I would spec for these guys. Now the controller that I would spec is this controller right here. And the reason I want this combo is one controller can control multiple cameras. I would spec at least 4 cameras, right? The cameras I would spec is a front shot, a side shot, probably a in the back of the room wide shot, and then maybe a top-down / audience cam shot. If I mount a camera up above the stage, I could use it as a top-down, or I could point it out onto the audience. So that's how I would do that. I have a camera kind of in the middle of the room for our studio, maybe be on a tripod on wheels so I can move it around for whatever reason. I have a camera mounted high up in the back of the room and probably on the side wall. I don't always do both sides. Again, I could move that middle camera to the side if I needed to, but I don't always do both sides. I usually pick one side, and that just gives the talent on stage less options. He's not like, where do I look? He knows this is my main camera, or I look here. Otherwise, I don't care. Like, I only look in 2 places. That simplifies it for on-stage talent. Because a lot of times in here, we don't have an in-person audience. We're just going virtual. So we're caring a lot about what the virtual looks like, and not so much about what it looks like in person. So we're setting up our shots and angling ourselves and our talent on stage so it looks really good on camera. All right, so this is the controller. You can look up reviews on this controller. I did. It's awesome. You can program movement shots, right? So really subtle zoom in and zoom outs, tracking, not tracking, but pans and tilts, etc. So you can do a lot of movement. It's very simple, again, once it's set up. A lot of this stuff is complicated because no one knows how to set it up. No one knows how it all actually works. That's the point of me doing this video. But once things are set up, it gets a lot more simple. You have your Stream Deck buttons that do very specific things. You have your 1ME Advanced panel that is in charge of cutting your show. You know exactly where to look and preview and program, etc. So this is the setup that I would use here. These are the cameras that I would use. I can get into placement and things like that. This video is already getting pretty long, but I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys liked this type of video. Again, I love explaining this type of stuff. I love walking through and talking through ideas with people. A lot of my consultations are all about, scenarios, ideas. Hey, help me fix this. How would I do this? Conceptually, situational. So these are the types of things that I'm really into. If you guys have questions about building out your own studios, if you guys are looking to build your studio and what gear you want to use, a lot of this, again, these are my recommendations. This is how I would build a studio right now. Different studios, I would build different ways, right? If your studio is not all about live streaming, but all about in-person audience, I might suggest we work some stuff a little bit differently. Maybe you need someone to switch the in-person show differently than the live stream, right? It's too much for one person to handle. I'm very much like one person can do it, but let's make it as easy as possible for one person to do it. Audio is a huge thing. You're not going to be able to switch your show and like run a band and a choir and do all these other audio. Like, it's hard. You're going to want multiple people. You're going to want the work spread out. You don't want one person to like get a text and get distracted and then like not focus on switching the show, right? You a lot of times need to focus. The best shows that I've been on, we've had not necessarily one person dedicated to one job, but obviously they were all pros in their jobs, but we were all very bored, but the show ran very well. Why were we bored? It was corporate. We didn't really care too much about it, but the show went fantastic. We knew our cues. We had a run of show, which I can give some examples if you guys are interested in what my run of shows tend to look like. I can give you some examples of that. But like the best shows, the ones that go well, are not chaotic. Now, the ones you talk and tell stories about, those are some of the chaotic ones, the ones that really interesting things happened, right? But the best shows, the ones that your clients want you to produce for them, you shouldn't have a tough time and you shouldn't be freaking out, right? And there are things, they'll throw you curveballs and you'll work vigorously and work through the curveball or whatever it is. A lot of times when I do those things and someone comes to me and they're not in a 16:9 box and I'm like, I gotta crop this and make it look good, my super source or whatever, my DVE. So I do a screen share, it's the wrong size through Zoom, etc. They're on a monitor and it's an ultra wide monitor and not a normal monitor, so I got all these black boxes and I need to get rid of them so it doesn't show up on screen, but I need to do all this in seconds, right? So you kind of program your Stream Deck buttons out for like a bunch of different things that could happen, and you hope you don't have to use them, right? So again, that's why we have all the Stream Decks. We also have the laptop. I didn't even touch on that. There's just a laptop sitting here. A lot of times, this laptop is my run a show, right? This is just like other information. I might be multitasking, right? I might be, like we're just sitting here on a wide shot, we're in a break, whatever. I'm finding information, people are emailing me stuff, whatever. I don't want to touch these computers because they're working on something, so I just have a laptop here. That's just a personal laptop. It's not doing anything important. It is on the network. I've edited lower thirds live, and literally, we got the graphics from the graphics team. Someone made an error. There was just a letter in the wrong spot, and they were like, we need to change that right now. Like, we're live, we're on camera, we're live. So all I did was I just opened up like my laptop, which again is sitting there open, ready to go. I pull it up, I take a letter from somewhere else, and I'm using Preview for this. I'm not even using Photoshop, I'm using Preview, the native application on a Mac, okay? Here's why the ecosystem. I scroll over the letter, copy it, move it over, I throw it on top, right? And so it covers up the missed thing. So now we have a correctly spelled name in the lower third. I then airdrop that to the graphics machine that's running the lower thirds, to ProPresenter, Playback 1, Playback 2 graphics, whatever you're using. I airdrop it over there, I replace it, and then I click on ProPresenter and it just faded the letter to change. So we literally still had the lower third up, and all this happened in a minute and a half maybe, right? So for a minute and a half, we had the wrong spelling of the name up on screen. That happens, that's show business. Did anyone really care? No. And in post-production, we can swap that. So we can throw it online to YouTube or whatever, we can swap that out. So a minute and a half mistake that no one really caught, right? No one really saw that the name was misspelled. The graphics people didn't even realize it, right? But we were able to switch that live. Why? Because we're built out to handle those types of changes. So that is a great example of why I stick with Macs and use the ecosystem there. If I have to use PCs, obviously we can, and there are reasons to go with PCs over Macs in certain situations. But this is the tech setup that I would stick with, that I would be happy to go run and build and switch a show on right now. We have a very similar setup, but it's not exact. So will we eventually build out this setup? Probably. Things will evolve over time. Will I change what is in this setup? Absolutely. Tomorrow, I could absolutely do a big change and say, I want a different audio board. We're going to use different controller. I doubt I'm going to go away from Blackmagic that fast. It's a pretty future-proof system. But I could say, hey, I have a different playback software now. We're bringing in talent differently now. We're going to use Ecamm instead of Zoom, or however we want to do this. We're going to use Skype, etc. So many reasons to do this. There's so much I did not cover. So if you guys have questions, you want to talk through ideas, you want to go through things, you can do it in the comments. You can send me an email. You can go to our website and set up a consultation, etc. I'll drop as much information about how to get in contact with us in the description below. But if you guys like this stuff, go ahead and check out our website, liveproductionmastery.com. And there's a whole bunch of resources there about how we wire this, a lot more information, diving more into the tech itself, because honestly, people like ideas on YouTube, but they want to get into the nitty gritty. It doesn't do very well. So we put that over on our main website. Go ahead and check it out there. Hope you guys like this video. Hope this helps some people. And yeah, feel free to subscribe and keep watching. Thanks. Have a good one.